Welcome to Stop Doing Stupid Stuff, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get real about what's working and what's not in today's business world. Your hosts are Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman, co-authors and business strategists from SDSS Global. With decades of combined experience in customer experience, workforce optimization, and operational strategy, Tim and Andreas bring a no-nonsense perspective to the challenges facing modern organizations. In this episode, they're tackling a question every business leader should be asking. Does your customer experience actually feel real? Drawing from two thought-provoking articles, one by Justin Bariso in Inc. magazine on Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol's controversial turnaround strategy, and another by Maria Ross in Forbes on why employee experience makes or breaks customer experience, Tim and Andreas explore why mandating authenticity never works, what Barnes & Noble got right that Starbucks might be getting wrong, and why the companies replacing human workers with AI may be repeating the mistakes of the IVR era. So, grab your coffee, hopefully with something genuine written on the cup, and let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe from SDSS Global and my co-conspirator, co-author, and pretty much a good friend for the most part, Andreas Wieman. And we are here to talk to you about another set of articles in the world of Stop Doing Stupid Stuff. So, Andreas, what do we have teed up for today?
Yeah, I kind of like that. Sometimes a good friend. What was that? I need to remember that next time.
Well, I'm
I
trying
think a
to.
good friend. A little ambiguous there. I
Well,
like it. I
I was
like
trying to
it.
think about, do you owe me money or not? That was kind of like,
All right, that's actually a fair retort. So touche. So we have actually two articles today. Normally we talk about one kind of article, and we try to do a good job about finding relevance in the audience's worlds, what's going on, to try to provide you some helpful guardrails, guidance, and discussion. At least that's what we think we do, and we feel pretty good about that. So if that's not happening, please don't tell us that. Let us live in fantasy land. But I think the articles today, there's two of them that we'll link in the description here. But the first one is from Inc. Mag. It's Starbucks CEO is making a very big mistake and it's destroying what made the company great. So this article, and I'll kind of paraphrase through this one, and then we'll kind of dive into why we think there's relevance into the other article that Tim's going to introduce here. But it basically is talking about Starbucks' new CEO who came from Chipotle and kind of turned it, at least is associated with turning it around, helping with sales, et cetera, right? They're a publicly traded company, and that's what everybody always looks at first. And so Starbucks is still kind of having a bit of a rough go of it. I think their stock prices slightly come up so far year to date, but if you go look at their full 1 year, 5 year, they're still down from where they were. And they were at a pretty high spot around there. And this is also in the middle of the pandemic as well. But the new CEO has introduced some new like dress code policy, some, what we think is we're going to call this process engineering or process, right, for the employees. So it's kind of like edicts, if you will, to the employees that say, hey, you have to look at your customers and, write something that you think is, and I'm paraphrasing here, catchy on the cup that's going to make them feel good. Okay. And guess what? Some of the employees are not exactly happy about the new dress code, having to be told what to do to this level of granularity. It's a big departure from what they're used to today. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's enough time that has passed to be able to assess it quantitatively, right, objectively, to say, is it helping sales? Is more customers coming back to Starbucks? What are the current, market pressures they're facing on competitors and prices and et cetera, et cetera. But it's just looking at the people. Like, remove all the numbers for a second and just look at the people that are involved. You've got people who have been doing something, for a while, and now you're kind of coming in and turning it topsy-turvy a bit and saying, "Oh, you got to do this, this, and this," and we're not really going to tell you why or how your individual contribution, delivers an objectively measured outcome that we can coach you to. Just do these things, and if you don't do these
Mhm.
things, we're going to have a talk. So that's kind of the gist of the article, and I probably paraphrased way too much and didn't do the author justice there, Tim. So please feel free to jump in. Justin Bariso is the
Justin Bariso.
author,
Yeah.
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 But what do you think?
Well, and I think the article is very interesting. It kind of looks at, I think, do we have a brand, right? Which is this, Nicole is trying to say we have a brand. It's going to be, you come in here, people are well dressed, and you're going to get a pithy saying, and we're trying to be personal. That every guest is unique and different, which is cool. I like that. But when it feels forced, which is kind of the implication here, then it will feel forced, and I think people will react to that. The other thing that was interesting in the article, and you didn't get into it too much, but the article pointed out what they thought was a pretty successful turnaround in Barnes and Nobles. I mean, here was the bookstore business, which completely almost vaporized, and what is they've done over at Barnes and Noble that's allowed at least a portion of their stores to really kind of reinvent themselves, and that's under the CEO James Dawn. And I think what was interesting there is Dawn is kind of turned kind of the autonomy lever to full ahead, right? Like, okay, you're there, you're on the ground, they're your customers. What do your customers want? And how do you interact with your customers in your community in whatever the nature of that is? And I think that's a little bit of what Starbucks was in the beginning.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, hey, we're not your corner store where you walked in and you got, it was meant to be the Italian barista experience where people sat down, they interacted with their neighbors and friends. They would turn a tiny little cup of espresso into a 2.5 hour conversation, and nobody rushed them out. And then, of course, it was nicer furniture. It was a comfortable place to be. And they did some very, intriguing things in there. We were all like, wow, this is a different coffee experience. Well, okay, everybody copied that, right? And there's a lot of those types of experiences out there. So now what do you do? And I do think the concept of the autonomy of the community makes a lot of sense because every community is different, and
Different.
I don't even know how many Starbucks there are. There are tens and tens of thousands of them, but I've been in some interesting ones, and you're like, I remember there's this one on the drive up to Sacramento. I used to stop it all the time. And they had their bulletin board. They had a lot, there were a lot of people that were regular commuters along that path, firefighters, firemen, police officers that would kind of cruise through there. And it was very personal, but it was also like, hey, here's our coffee grounds for fertilizer, yada, yada, yada. And then you go into one in Manhattan where you got a completely different clientele that doesn't want to sit around and BS. They're like, I'm here, I want my coffee, I'm going back to the office, right? And or whatever that might look like. And oh, by the way, I want to be able to mobile order it so I don't even have to wait in line. And there, the audience is looking for a different experience and understanding what that experience is and delivering it, I think, is more than just, hey, have a nice day written on your cup. It's
Right.
what do you need, Tim? Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think you made a really great mental visually point right here, though. So you're talking about New York on the East Coast. You're talking about San Fran up through Sacramento and your drive there and the way. So think about all of the differences in between Manhattan and Sacramento, right?
Mhm.
The entire U.S. is between both of those cities, right? So to your point, the autonomy in being able to say, look, I'm in, I don't know, Omaha, Nebraska, right? It's kind of in the middle, probably more towards the west, but relatively speaking, it's kind of in the middle. It's completely different than either Manhattan or San Francisco, Sacramento area, right? So having that autonomy is being able to adjust and say, okay, here's what's going on in Omaha, Nebraska. Here's what we need to do. Here's the clientele that we are asking to give us money, right? And we're engaging with them. How can we engage with them in meaningful ways so they continue to give us money, right? That's it. Like that's the formula you got to figure out. Now, figuring that out is the hard part. Like that, saying it's the easy part, figuring out is the hard part. But I think going through a level of autonomy is so vitally important because if you try to just standardize everything from a corporate headquarter location, right? Because Starbucks in Seattle, you just say, all right, everybody's got to wear this uniform and do this. Like people, to your point in Manhattan, you got Wall Street workers, right? Let's say we're downtown, Lower Manhattan, and people want to they want to get out of there really quick. They want to get their delicious coffee made the way that they want it and go on with their day and have a
Great.
productive day. They want to be quick about it. People over in San Francisco, Most of them, well, you're there too, so you're probably like that too. You kind of, pushy and want to get the hell out of there, not be social or anything. So maybe a different example. People here in Tampa Bay, for example, we're like, nah, let's be nice to people. We want to. I'm being super facetious, by the way, to the
Yes,
audience.
I know.
Tim
I know.
Tim hasn't interrupted me, so I think he knows there's like a shred of truth to that. I guess I don't know, but no, seriously,
But
some people they want to have it's differences, and it's looking at those differences, and from the corporate office, right? And like, look, the CEO has a big daunting task for all of the reasons you mentioned around the variability that we're facing speaking in the U.S. in the economy, the differences, the generational workforce, what they're trained to do. Like, I was gonna, you would have been proud of me, Tim. I didn't interrupt you. I was up like really close. I came off of mute, and I'm like, nah, just shut up and wait for him to stop talking in 15 minutes and then bring it up. But you made one man, no reaction out of you at all from my snide little comments here. I love it.
I'm waiting.
But
I'm waiting. That's okay.
there was one point you brought up, and I forget exactly what you said, but it was spot on to where people, what are people trained for? So to write something, catchy on the cup that's going to make the customer look at it and say, "Oh man, I really like him. I'm going to come back to Starbucks tomorrow and pay $3 to get another small coffee." Who's trained them? Like out of Starbucks, who the hell has trained them to say, okay, Tim, here's what you need to do. I'm only gonna pay you, I don't know, maybe $15 an hour, probably a little bit less than that in some of the locations, right? Here's what you need to do when Andreas comes in, look at him, look what he's wearing, see what kind of shoes he has, look at his face, his facial expressions, listen to how he orders,
Do I
and
have to?
then to take all of that and then go make a delicious cup of Starbucks, venti. I always get a venti, by the way, and make sure that you write something really catchy on there. Make sure that the quality of that coffee is like perfect and everything's perfect. And who the hell has
Yeah.
trained them to do this stuff? And
Well,
so,
and you know what you're going to get is you're going to get have a nice day on every cup of coffee. And then some New
right,
Yorker is going to go, who are you to tell me to have a nice day or whatever? And again, the point being, I think that, and I don't want to beat this to death because I want to get into a little bit of the other article here, but the point I think both of us are making, it's very, very hard to mandate a perception of or a face that isn't real. There are many, many companies that have do customer experience, I think, in an extraordinary way. Disney has been notorious. I shouldn't say notorious. Disney has been well known for that and the way they treat guests, but they spend the time to teach their staff the soft skills, the way to
right.
observe and active listen and identify ways to de-escalate situations, which many companies don't bother to do because it's hard. And again, and this is the piece that I always, value when I'm around people where it feels real. And that's the
Exactly.
power of it, because when it feels real, you feel valued. When it doesn't feel real, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably violate, 15 different Spotify things, but it's bullshit. And it
It's
feels like
performative.
bullshit. And it's
It's
exactly right. It's just performance.
You can
And
hire actors to go perform what you're asking them to do, and then your business model would be
right.
the best in class, assuming that it actually works, which I'm highly skeptical, and the odds are probably
But
high it
but when
doesn't
it
going to
feels
work.
real, it feels real. And so again, kind of going into the next article, which is a little bit older. This is actually from last July, but this is from Forbes magazine, and it really talks to it's entitled "Employee Experience Makes or Breaks Customer Experience" by Maria Ross. And I think that what I liked about this is it really did lean into, kind of a data-driven approach on this. It starts with some reports from PwC. We talk a lot about the Gallup State of the Global Workplace report that we quote a lot. And you're looking at, wow, 82% of US and 74% of non-US customers want more human interactions in their brand experiences. And yet, what are we hearing right now is company after company as well. We're laying off thousands of customer facing employees because we're going to replace them with AI. And I'm going to play the I've seen this movie before card and said, in the late 90s and early 2000s, we talked a lot about intelligent IVR, interactive IVR systems that were going to replace the need for customer service people because you would have initially it was DTMF, right? Press one for sales, press two for service. And everybody called it voicemail jail. And everybody had the hacks out there on how to bypass the tree and get to the agent. Oh, and then we had natural language understanding. Oh, we don't need to have DTMF tones. You can just tell us what you want. And then you'd get I'm sorry, I don't understand. Please repeat. No, I really want to know. And customers would what? Scream bloody murder. And then they would finally they'd learn to say agent, agent, agent. And finally they get routed to somebody who's now got to deal with an even
A
more
super
frustrated
pleasant,
customer.
a super
Yeah.
pleasant customer, right?
And
That's gone
even
through this IVR menu and is like super happy to express their feelings about the
Well,
menu
and
to
on
the
top of
person.
that, they've screened for agent. Now they've gone into a queue because there are fewer agents available because
Yep.
we streamlined that because we said, oh, this IVR system is going to deflect. Remember that call? And you and I, we were part of that story, right? We were all about call deflection. Could we deflect calls that didn't have to go to a human?
And
And
self-serve, yeah.
and it's self-serve. And when it's done right, it works really well. But when it's done poorly or it's not maintained appropriately, it gets bad really, really quickly.
And one
And
one quick comment though on this is because this is what I think is also going on with AI, and I am going to be quick about this, so it's super high level.
okay, let me take a nap
The
while you do this.
people selling you AI are the same people that sold you the IVR, and it wasn't like what Tim and I are talking about of saying we're not saying everything goes through the IVR. We're saying there's probably very transactional things that you don't need to occupy a human's time for, and so here's a subset, maybe 20%. Well, you know what? If someone's trying to sell you an IVR and it's only 20%, that ain't gonna fly. It's gonna make their job super hard. So you know what? Now it turns into IVR is king. Guess what? Just take out the vernacular, switch it out from IVR with AI. You have the same thing that's going on today. AI is gonna solve everything. It's not the people that actually make it and enable it. It's the people trying to sell it to you, and the executives are blown away. And then the people that are
Uh,
used to using it are like, "What is this? What's going on?" So, anyways, I think that segues really nicely into the next article because these are the people that got to deal with it, the doers, as we call them.
right, right. Because they're on the other end at the dealing with these customers who've had this now bad experience with whether it's AI, previous IVR, take your pick, and they're now coming in either coming in through chat or they're coming in through voice or they're coming in the door. In a hotel, like I've tried to do X number of things as part of my registration or to get my room resolved, and I can't get it done. So now I'm really pissed, and you have to help me. And so that's it. And now you're putting all this additional pressure on the human. I'm just in the middle of a conversation about, thinking about customer service reps. And people are like, oh, these poor customer service reps that are losing their jobs, and they are. And now, of course, how do we help those, service reps step up into the new world? And I think the new world is, well, maybe there are fewer calls from the human because we're doing what we just talked about, call deflection or whatever, but those calls are more complex. They're more frustrated. They require, more extraordinary skills on the part of the agent. And again, these companies are going to say, well, we implemented AI tools, we reduced our cost per call and our customer experience infrastructure costs by 30 or 40%. But I think what we're going to see is the outcomes, the sales, the renewals, the customer satisfaction, the CSAT scores are not going to go in a positive direction.
But
And
it's
we've
all
seen this before.
projections. It's all projections though. Like name and if someone wants to put them in the comments, go ahead because I've challenged this like many people on this. Show me one company that has actually invested in AI significantly and they're publicly disclosing the amount that's invested and the return on investment that they received, either by the reduction in force that they're claiming they're getting because now you have an AI system and their overall investment is way lower than it is versus the salaries and wages they were paying people. Show me a single line item or a company that's
Yeah.
actually not talking about a pilot that's small scale, but the billions of dollars that are being invested in AI solutions that are delivering on that promise. And that'll
Well,
be a great conversation.
I'd love to get involved in it because I haven't seen it either. I mean, we've seen the announcement, what was that, a year and a half ago from Klarna that about getting rid of 700 people. And then 6 months later, they said they had to bring those 700 people back because the quality delivered by the AI tools was not what the customers were willing to accept.
Exactly.
And now I also don't want to be a Luddite here. I do think AI has some significant opportunities in
Absolutely.
process optimization, particularly in the back end. And when it's combined with the human being, right? So this
Yeah.
is where I think you get to the AI enabled customer service reps, the ones that are going to get learn how to use AI to make themselves more accurate, more effective, and more timely to meet a customer's requirements. Those are the ones that are going to have real success. But I think there's going to be a real rebellion by customers to want to interact with humans. I mean, I don't think it's a rebellion. I think it's just it's a human state, and we're
Yeah.
seeing it over and over again. Now, maybe when AI starts being the product, the buyer of products, it'll be a different story. But I don't think that's the case right now.
No, not at all. Someone should come up with a really catchy tagline on that, by the way, of saying hi to AI, human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Just saying. Just saying. But I think
If
Maria,
I knew anybody who was that smart, I'd talk to him about it.
that's funny. But to your point, Tim, I think Maria, I'm gonna give Maria like huge kudos and props on this article because it really aligns what we've also been talking about for a couple of, I'm just gonna say loosely a couple of years now. It's probably longer than that, but it's about the humans. It's about it starts with the employees. Unless you have a fully automated company that is only dependent on the sole output of the product or service that the customer is consuming, and even that is still a bit of a stretch, but it's about the humans. And it starts with your employees. If your employees are, even if you're hiring people, like the hiring practice today, say, well, Tim, you've got a lot of experience here, and I'm gonna offer the job over someone that has less experience to you. Okay, well, what is the relevant experience that you're quantifying here? Is it from 10 or 15 years ago? And how relevant is it in today's dynamic environment versus the consumers or customers, clientele that we're going to be interacting with as an organization? And because that's what's always been done, that's what's being applied today. So you hire a bunch of people, you don't really train them as much because you assume they have all of this great knowledge and industry experience, but you're not assessing the change in the industry itself and adjusting your variability for that and saying, oh, Tim's got experience, but it's really shifted a little bit quicker than it has during his experience. It's 15 years plus of experience in this area. We've got to train them. That's what we've got to do. We've got to centralize and focus on the employees, give them better training. And guess what? The earlier example we talked about, the age difference between Tim, myself, and the generations we're in versus hiring Gen Z people that are coming into the workplace. Because guess what? There ain't going to be extra boomers and Gen Xers. Our population is only going to continue to deplete as we exit the workforce for various reasons. It's going to be supplemented by millennials and Gen Z slash Gen Y. I don't know which one to call it because they call it both Gen Y, Gen Z. I don't know why they get their own based off of that. That's for another podcast, I guess. But that whole nother Gen Z generation, right? And so, how do you personalize it to where if you have this makeup of a workforce that usually was a bit siloed, it's more diverse now at the front line, at middle management. And again, looking at, and this is where I think Maria is just props to her. She's quoting these data sources like the Gallup Global State of the Workplace, which is a great report. I highly recommend everybody check that out. You're looking at all of these variables of disengagement. I think it's 21%, right, is the global workforce number of they feel engaged. That means 20% of the global workers feel like their managers care enough to coach them and talk to them and be with them. 21%. So whatever the remaining percent is, that's the amount of people that are neutral or feel disengaged. That's a pretty terrible number. But then you look at the manager engagement, and that's down too. You wonder why companies are getting rid of middle managers that are ones that engage with the frontline employees. And now you have executive leaders who are taking up that ratio, and now they're the frontline managers too, along with their other tasks, their other departments that they manage. And so it's just a recipe. If you just step back and look at it mathematically, it's just a recipe for disaster. And that's what we're seeing in the workplace today. Once we get out of this circular revenue sharing amongst companies and you're just coming back and looking at retail organizations, I guess are probably one of the better industries to look at. They're struggling right now. They're also being held to a standard that I think was artificially high. But once that equalizes and you go back and look, it's a tough environment and people have less money to part with. So now everybody's kind of fighting for consumers' dollars here, and talking specifically in retail. And what do the
Yep.
retail organizations do? They don't have the tools to cope with the variables that are going on today. So let me just do what I did 5, 10 years ago to be successful. And it's not applicable. It's not wholly applicable to what's going on today.
You know, different work group, different environment, different customer
Exactly.
expectations as well, and what they're looking for. And, also, I mean, people I think are expecting that the employees have access to information so they can help them. Being nice is just not enough.
Right.
I mean, being nice and being real and, being real in that feeling is important, but being able to be knowledgeable because, hey, don't you have tools? Can't you pull it up on your phone? Why don't, blah, 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 blah. But I think I think we may kind of beaten this one to death, but I think the bottom line here is, one, customer experience is still a human driven event. And when it's human driven, it has to look and feel real to both parties to be effective. And I also think the data shows that if you are in a particularly B2C business, but this is true in B2B, you've got to be focused on both sides of the equation. You can't, you can have the greatest technology on the planet for customer experience, but if you're not delivering on the human component of it, you will struggle.
Yeah. Agreed. And like, look, it's not easy. Right now, I think is one of the most challenging times because it's so the global workplace and consumer base is so varied today versus any point in modern history. So
Agreed.
you've got all of these different dynamics, and that's where I think the autonomy piece is so vital to adjust locally for what's going on in that market and getting the right leaders and supporting the right leaders to be able to do that because it's a reciprocating effect. But you can't just focus on the CX side, the customer experience side, the EX side. In fact, I would almost say if you focus, probably shift a bit more to the employee experience, not only will you see your bottom line start to improve your profitability because your labor shrinkage numbers, all of that start to improve as your people feel more valued. And then they'll let you know what's going on. I mean, we have a
Well,
great AI tool, BalanceWise IQ, that it's a listening post for employees. The ideas that we get from employees, not only do they say, oh man, this company's listening to me, not on a stupid annual survey, by the way, but on a weekly basis, we can say, hey, I was a part of this process and I think this would be a little bit better. We're seeing that from the employees and they feel appreciated that they have the autonomy to be able to speak
well,
freely like that without retribution and they're heard. So they stick around and they try a little bit harder. It's really as simple as that.
I agree. And the other piece to it is that if you're bringing in new technology, and whether it's AI or whatever, if your employees aren't involved and they don't see the value of it, you're not going to get the adoption, and therefore
Yep.
you're burning that money. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to all our listeners. We really appreciate your time. Please comment. And if you have additional thoughts on what we should be talking about or not talking at all, feel free to let us know.
Yep. And remember, stop doing stupid stuff. Thanks, everybody.